Hello, everybody. Can you hear me now? Good, good. You can see me too. Oh, what a relief. Okay, well, great to see so many people here from so many different places. Um, so we'd better get on with this presentation because we're starting it late. Thank you very much for waiting. And let's fingers crossed that it's all going to go without a hitch now. Okay, so I'm Sue, and the title of this section is Focus on Meaning. I am the author with Vaughan Jones of the Focus series. I'm going to speak to you for about 45 minutes now, all being well. And at the end of the session, I'm very happy to take any questions you may have. So I'm speaking to you from Oxford. These are the famous Dreaming Spires. And unfortunately, it's not such a beautiful day here today. It's wild, wet and windy. So I hope it's much better where you are. So back to this session then. And the key features of the focus series are the three M's. Motivation, that's engaging content, memory, repeated exposure, and meaning, meaningful practice. So in this webinar, I'm going to focus on the third M for meaning. But before I go into any more detail about that, I'd just like to briefly recap the other two M's. So the first M is M for motivation. The great American linguist and much more Noam Chomsky says that the truth of the matter is that about 99% of teaching is making the students interested in the material. Then the other 1% has to do with your methods. This quote sums up our belief about teaching. The you know, Chomsky's probably exaggerating slightly, but the message is very clear that content is king, that engaging material is the key to the success of a lesson. Now, motivation is the subject of a webinar next Wednesday by our colleague Rob Dean, Wednesday the 16th. But in this webinar, I will be showing you some material that we consider to be engaging for this upper secondary age group. So the next M, the second M, if you like, is memory, repeated exposure. Now, the focus series, vocabulary takes them stage. We take recycling of vocabulary very seriously indeed. As this quote here says, various studies create a range of 5 to 16 encounters with a word for a student to truly acquire it. Students need to meet the same word or piece of vocabulary between 5 and 16 times before they know it. I believe the magic number is 7. Paul Nation, the man we are quoting here, is Emeritus Professor in the School of Linguistics and Applied Language Studies at Victoria University in Wellington, New Zealand. His books on vocabulary acquisition have been a great influence on us in our teaching and in our writing. Now, memory and acquisition, vocabulary acquisition, was the subject of a webinar last Wednesday by Vaughan Jones. I hope you caught it. If you did, I just want to apologise in advance for any repetition, but Vaughan and I share the same basic beliefs about language learning, and so a little bit of overlap is inevitable. So the focus, as I said, the focus of this webinar is on meaning, and I'm going to be talking to you about how we keep meaning at the center of everything we do in focus. In order to do that, I've divided the webinar into 3 parts. So starting with meaningful topics, by that I mean topics that are appropriate to this age group, and topics that mean something to them. Number 2, meaningful contexts. In focus, our lessons are based on real people doing real things in real places. All our texts are based on authentic sources, some of them adapted so that they are useful for language input. So I'll be talking more about that. Finally, I'll demonstrate activities, meaningful classroom activities. What I mean by that is we feel that students are our most valuable resource, and these practice activities draw on the students' knowledge and experience of the world. So, meaningful topics. Now, you've probably noticed that in all upper secondary course books, the same topics come up time and time again. People, health, technology, holidays, free time, the environment, and so on. And so the big challenge for the coursebook writer is to come up with fresh angles and new twists on these rather well-worn topics. And that's something that Vaughan Jones and I relish, actually, and it's in fact the part of the job that I like most. For this age group, this mid to late teens age group, this age group has its own set of challenges, if you like. It's a delicate balance to achieve between very adult themes that they don't have any experience of and can't engage with, or at the other end of the extreme, presenting them with topics that they may consider to be childish or immature. I mean, I think the worst thing you can possibly do is present a 15-year-old with a topic that they think is more appropriate for a 12-year-old. So our solution is to target young adults. So let's look at a few examples of how we've done that. So here we are. This is the universal topic, if you like, here is places. And in this lesson, predictably, the students learn phrases to talk about cities. The angle we chose here was the Youthful Cities Index. Now, I know that sounds made up, but it isn't. It exists. It really exists. It's a global initiative to rank the world's top 100 cities from a youth perspective. Youth in this case is from 15 to 29. So this Youthful Cities Index, they use criteria to rank these cities that include things that are likely to matter to young people. Things like the cost of accommodation, job opportunities, public transport, open green spaces and sports facilities, nightlife, of course, safety and diversity. Then in the lesson, the students are given the opportunity to talk about what's important to them in a place. Now, this is an annual study, and you might be interested to know that in 2014, the top 3 cities were in 3rd place, New York, in 2nd place, Berlin, and in 1st place, Toronto, here on the right on the screen with the big tower there. In 2015, this had changed a bit. In 2015, in 3rd place was Berlin, in 2nd place, London, and in 1st place, New York. And apparently, the most affordable city for young people is Sydney, which I find surprising. It's not what I've heard about Sydney. I've heard it's a rather expensive city. So moving on to the next global topic, family. This lesson is about family celebrations. Now, you know, in every country in the world, just about, there is some sort of ceremony for celebrating young people's journey into adulthood, their coming of age, if you like. We chose to focus on Japan here for this lesson. In some countries, the important age is 15. In the UK, it's 18. I don't know what the age is in your countries, but in Japan, it's 20. And on the second Monday of every January, all young people who have their 20th birthday in that year celebrate on that day. Now, Japan may be remote for our students. I mean, I doubt whether many of them will have had any first-hand experience of Japan, but birthdays are universal, aren't they? And the way we celebrate big birthdays is the same all around the world. Music, food, dancing, dressing up, speeches, emotional relatives. I think that we all share the same kind of celebrations. So this text about Japan then is a springboard for students to talk about their own special birthdays and customs in their own country. Culture. So there are many interesting and exciting modern artists around the world. The reason we chose these two particularly are for their combination of edgy artwork and social comment. So on the left is the work of French photographer J.R. This is part of a project that he called Women Are Heroes. Here he has taken photographs of the women who live in these houses. This is a favela in Brazil, and JR took photographs of the women who lived there and pasted their faces on the facades of the houses. These favelas face into the city, so the aim, JR's aim, was to give voice to the women who don't usually have one. He says that by putting their faces on facades, they are saying to the rest of the city, hey, we're here, don't forget about us. On the right is an image by the now famous British street artist Banksy. He's very popular with young people because his images usually have an interesting message. This particular piece of artwork represents peaceful protest. Of course, he's also interesting because he's very mysterious. We don't know his true identity. He could be a woman. So, while culture is it's an engaging topic, and we have no difficulty finding loads of interesting material for the topic of culture. The next topic is a bit more difficult: the environment. In my experience, the environment is the least favorite topic of any age group. And so the challenge for us was to find a fresh angle that could engage young people. And we found Boyan Slat, the boy in the photograph here. Boyan Slat is a young Dutch engineering student, and at the age of 19, he came up with a method of cleaning up the ocean, the pollution in the ocean. The story is that he went on holiday to Greece, went diving, and was horrified to find more plastic bags than fish. And so he went back to his engineering workshop and designed a system for catching plastic debris driven by ocean currents. Basically, his more than a gadget, his piece of machinery is a huge, long, floating barrier, 100 kilometers long. And the way it works, and the ingenious way it works, is that the ocean currents push the plastic into the barrier collects the plastic and can then be collected without damaging the sea life that passes underneath. So I don't know if you've ever heard of these hideous and disgusting seas of plastic around the world. There are 5 of them. They're called gyres because they're kept together with a sort of with the current moving around. And the biggest one is the Pacific garbage patch, twice the size of France. And Boy and Slat's aim is to start cleaning up this Pacific garbage patch in 2020. So because he's young, the students can identify with him and more easily than they might if we'd just presented them with a bunch of statistics. Often telling a human story makes a topic more engaging, and this is the same with the next topic. Technology can often be a bit dry, but these two young people here are vloggers, and vloggers, or video bloggers, I'm sure you knew that. These vloggers are the new pop stars. They have their own YouTube channels and a very special interactive relationship with their audience through social media. This is a relatively new phenomenon, but one that's growing and quickly evolving, and it's part of our target markets world, which makes it meaningful to them. Another tricky subject here, clothes. The reason why clothes is tricky as a topic is because it's sometimes off-putting for boys. So the challenge is to find an angle that will get everybody involved. For this, we chose jeans because they're ubiquitous. But the angle we chose was to go for a historical perspective. So I'm just going to read you a little extract from Focus 4. This is the history of jeans. I'll just read you a small extract. So in the 1800s, denim was a kind of cotton made in Nîmes, de Nîmes. The first blue denim trousers were worn by sailors in Genoa, Gênes in French. So bleu de Gênes became blue jeans. In the 1850s then, blue jeans as we know them originated during the 1849 Californian gold rush. German storekeeper Levi Strauss and Latvian tailor Jacob Davis developed a stronger design using copper rivets, and so on, right down to the 2000s. So in the 2000s today, jeans are worn by everyone. Every American owns, on average, how many pairs of jeans, in your opinion? How many pairs of jeans do you think every American owns on average? 8, 7, 10, 20? Pretty good, yep. I'd say the average number I'm seeing in the chat box is 7, and you're right. Every American owns an average of 7 pairs of jeans. So you learn so much with Focus. So the subject of work and study. Students of this age are they're looking forward now to university or future careers, and are listening about how to get a place at university in Britain mirrors the kind of issues that this age group will be thinking about. So they learn in this listening things like when to apply, what qualifications they need, what kind of exams, how much they'll pay in fees, and so on. In terms of work and future careers, we chose this female airline pilot as a subject, not only for the positive reinforcement of gender equality, but, you know, of course, that's important, but as a way of highlighting some of the real challenges that women face when they choose what are traditionally male professions. Moving up to this headline here, what makes you happy in your job? This is the headline for an article about the happiness factor in different jobs. You may be surprised to hear that the happiest job, according to this article, is hairdresser. Not that we're trying to encourage everybody to become hairdressers, but I was quite surprised. It's not a particularly well-paid job. They're on their feet all day, they do long hours, but I don't know if you can imagine why this is such a happy job. But when I read the reasons, I thought, well, yes, that actually figures. It's a very simple thing. hairdressers make people feel better about themselves. How do they do this? Well, first of all, they give you a new look, which is good. And secondly, they give you a free therapy session, don't they? You know, if you think about it. So what not to love about that? Hairdressers make people happy. Anyway, these were a few examples of angles on themes that we think upper intermediate students can relate to. Whoops, Henry's lost his second name down there. But in short, if the interest of students is not engaged, the learning process is unlikely to get off the ground at all. So says Henry Widdowson. Henry Widdowson is an authority in the field of linguistics, applied linguistics, and English language teaching and learning. In his book, Defining Issues in English Language Teaching, he emphasizes the importance of relating the teaching material to the student's reality. And we agree wholeheartedly with this statement. Now, moving swiftly on to the second part of the webinar, meaningful contexts. So we use authentic texts in focus because we believe that the more real the material, the more interested the students are, and the more likely we are as teachers to get a genuine response from the students to the material. So as with the topics, we've gone with texts that have a particular angle or edge or some kind of backstory. So I'm going to show you some examples now. I'm also going to show you briefly some examples of the ways we adapt the material to make it more accessible to our students and to make it as useful as possible as language input. When we find a text, a piece of authentic material that we think has potential, we ask ourselves these three questions. Sounds obvious, doesn't it? Number one, is it interesting? Well, it is obvious, but it's worth asking. Obviously, not do I think it's interesting, but is it interesting for our target market? Number two, is there anything in this text that my students can relate to their own lives? Because if the subject of the text is completely alien to the students, we won't get them engaged with it. Number three, can they learn something about the language? Well, of course, this is incredibly important for us because we are language teachers. So we need this text to teach them something about the language. So with these three questions in mind, let's look at some examples. Right, this first example was a magazine article, and the first thing that attracted me to it was the photograph of, as far as I can see, a very little girl painting a rather sophisticated modern art painting. So is it interesting, this article? Well, I thought so because it's the story of a 3-year-old artist who is considered to be a genius, or is she? Because some people think she's a fraud. Can the students relate to it? Yes, I think so. It's a human interest story. What about the language? Can they learn anything about the language? Well, when I first read the article, the language point jumped out at me. It's a perfect contextualization of reported speech. You can see all the different reporting verbs highlighted in blue here. So a fantastic example of fantastic examples of the target language. Here's another, well, here are two feel-good stories. These are more human interest stories. Are they interesting? Well, I think so. They went viral on social media. You may even have read them. The one on the left is about, well, they're both about homeless men. The one on the left is about a homeless man who, a woman accidentally dropped her diamond engagement ring into his collection cup. And instead of flogging it and never having to beg again, he kept it for her, realizing how important it was for her, and returned it to her. Of course, he was rewarded because then when the story went viral, people donated money to him, and he collected $185,000. So he's no longer on the street. The story on the right is another sort of random act of kindness story. This policeman came upon a homeless man one freezing night, and the man didn't have any boots, so the policeman went and bought him some. So nice, heartwarming stories. Can the students relate to them? Yes, I think they're the sort of things that could happen anywhere in the world. What about the language? Well, these stories contextualize affixation perfectly, and you can see the words highlighted in red there just about. Also, some lovely phrases came out of these stories, the sort of phrases that you would use if you were relating a similar kind of story. So warm somebody's heart, put a smile on somebody's face, and make somebody's day. So moving from a feel-good story to a feel-bad story, the next text is about exams. So no problem for the students relating to it because they've got exams coming out of their ears at this age. The reason I've included this one is because it's funny. It's a funny story. And I wanted to make the point that humour is a very good way of getting the students engaged. What about the language? Right, okay, I'm going to read you this story, and there is a language point that popped out at me when I first read it. As I read it, why don't you see what language point pops out at you? Imagine you were taking an important exam on Monday. What would you do the weekend before? You almost certainly wouldn't do what two chemistry students did in Kansas, Missouri. They went to a different city and partied all weekend. They had a great time, but they knew that unless they got back in time for the exam, they wouldn't be able to take it. So they drove through the night and got back to college in the early hours of Monday morning. Sadly for them, they overslept and missed the exam. When they found their professor afterwards, they decided to invent a story. They told him that they would have got back for the exam had they not had a flat tire. The professor thought about this for a moment and then agreed that provided they arrived before 9 a.m., they could take the exam the next day. He placed them in separate rooms and gave them the exam paper. The first question was simple and worth 5 points, but they were unprepared for the question on the next page. Question 2, worth 95 points. Which tire? So, what language point? Did you spot it? Did you spot the language point? Um, conditionals. Yes, I'm seeing loads of people saying conditionals, loads of past tenses as well. It was actually the conditionals that jumped out at us. So here, that story is on the page that we used it for. Conditional clauses, alternatives to if. I hope you like that story. So most of the stories we've, or rather, most of the texts we've seen so far have been magazine articles or newspaper articles. We also like to use extracts from novels, from literature. This novel, called Gone, is the first novel in a series, in a best-selling series for young adults. Now, do I think it's interesting for the students? Yes, that's certainly why we chose it. The series is centered on a fictional place in which every human aged 15 and older vanishes. Can the students relate to it? Yes. It's described as a young adult dystopian science fiction novel. So I think there's plenty there to appeal. Also, the first thing that happens in the first novel is that the teachers all disappear. So I think they'll quite like that. And in terms of the language, we use extracts like this to develop the students' reading skills. But of course, the tasks are very important, and it's important to include motivating tasks. You can't see very well here, but for the task that goes alongside this novel extract requires the students to choose the elements of a story that they think makes a good story. So things like intriguing characters, humor, mystery, and that kind of thing. So it's a task that has a double purpose. First, they decide whether these features are in this extract, and then they discuss whether which features are important to them personally. So it's a kind of task that gets them thinking quite critically. So moving on now, this next article is we chose it as a sort of new angle on homes and places to live. It's about life on board the International Space Station. 6 astronauts live on the space station. Is it interesting? Well, I find it completely fascinating. I think most people do. Can students relate to it? Well, obviously they've never been on the space station. They may have seen the film Gravity, which would help them to imagine life on the space station. But to help them also relate to it, we chose to focus on a kind of everyday aspect of life on the station, how they wash and sleep. In terms of the language, again, we used it to develop reading skills. Now, this was a very long article, the original, very long, and so we needed to cut it down considerably before we used it in the book. So to show you how we did that, I'd like to pick out one paragraph from the article and show you some of the ways we used to adapt this text. So here we are in this screen. I've taken one paragraph. At the top is the original paragraph, and at the bottom is how it is once it's been adapted. Right, I'm going to just run through the things I've highlighted in red in the original, the things that I changed, and put them in blue in the adapted version. So I'll just run through those things. Sometimes to simplify, you need to expand a sentence. Very often, authentic texts are quite elliptical. So the first few words in the original version, in such close quarters, we've changed it to as they live so close together, which is easier to understand. We have changed a lot of the low frequency words for more high frequency words. So a must is low frequency, essential is high frequency. A delicate chore is low frequency, difficult is a high frequency word. Squirt, I'd squirt a little water under my hair. It's a nice word, and we could have kept it, but we chose a higher frequency word, put. In the last line, I'd put some shampoo in my hand and moosh it around. Moosh doesn't even exist in the dictionary, so we chose a high frequency word, move. Now, those are the low frequency to high frequency words. Very often in authentic texts, sentences are very long with numerous clauses. So this sentence beginning, even Sunita Williams, has several clauses. Even Sunita Williams, who spent 195 consecutive days on the space station, a female record, had her long dark hair chopped to shoulder length, but still had problems. That's pretty long. So we cut it down to Sunita Williams, who spent 195 days on the space station, explains how she managed. So there's one other thing we do, which is if there are any sort of specifically cultural references, we take them out so as not to distract the students or give the teachers a headache explaining them in the classroom. So in this line, many astronauts use the music festival favorite, Moist Wipes. We took out the music festival favorite because it's a reference, it's a cultural reference to the fact that music festivals, people use moist wipes. So there we are. Those are a few of the things we do. But to recap, our main aim is to maximize high frequency vocabulary. This is because these are the words that the students are most likely to come across again when they are reading other texts. The most frequent 1,000 words in the language account for 80% of most authentic text. You can see how important it is to expose them to these high frequency words. What I mean by high frequency words are those that belong to the top 3,000 most common words in the English language. Now, of course, we don't take out all the low frequency words. In this particular text, there are plenty of low frequency words that we left in because they're part of the topic. So those would be words like astronaut, weightlessness, gravity, panoramic view, mission control. Those are low frequency words, but of course we left them in because they're part of the topic. Okay, so that's all I wanted to say about the context for now. You may have questions and I'm happy to answer them at the end, but let's move on to the last part of the webinar now, which is meaningful practice. So in this part of the webinar, I'm going to show you exercises that set the students up to make meaningful utterances. In other words, show you exercises that get the students talking about things that really matter to them. In order to explain what I mean by meaningful, it's probably a good idea to start by showing you something that I consider to be meaningless. So look at this exercise. Now this is a pretty standard language practice exercise. It's a gap fill. We took it off, I took it off a website, a language practice website. And in terms of practicing language, it's pretty standard. How much money does a waitress? Choose the correct form of make or do. How much does a waitress make? Could you do the washing today? Did Tom's new business make a profit last year? And so on. So it's a pretty standard exercise, but our problem with it is that it has no connection at all to the students' real life. Let's look at those. Let's look at the exercise again. How much money does a waitress make? Where? Here in the UK, in your country? I mean, I haven't got a clue. Look at number 3. Did Tom's new business make a profit last year? Who's Tom? And even if I did know Tom, he probably wouldn't share that information with me, and so on. So this is an exercise that talks about people that who don't exist and situations that the students have never experienced. It's language for language's sake, and this is what we call meaningless. And we don't like these sort of exercises. We want them to be meaningful. So let's contrast this one then with a very similar exercise, practicing make and do. It's another gap fill. Did you make your bed this morning? Do your neighbors ever make a noise? Do you like doing the washing up? And so on. What makes this exercise meaningful is the second part of the exercise, where we personalize with the question, ask your partner the questions. So in the second part of the exercise, the students exchange real information. Now I'm going to show you a few different ways of getting this personalization going in practice exercises. But before I do, I just want to make the point that personalization doesn't mean asking the students to talk about deeply personal things. That would be awful. And this age group in particular would probably be reluctant to talk about anything too personal. It's more about getting the students to talk about real situations that mean something to them. So let's look at a few other examples of ways to do that. Right, this first one is another example of where the students do the exercise on two levels. First of all, they choose the correct answer. In this case, crossing out the impossible or very unlikely option. So, have you ever burnt your tongue, fingers? Unlikely to be ribs. Cross it out. Have you ever cut your teeth, lip, heel? Unlikely to be teeth, so cross it out, and so on. So once the students have got the correct answers, the teacher then has the option of recycling the exercise as a personalized speaking exercise. This kind of exercise is also very useful for quick finishers because if a few students have finished the exercise more quickly, the teacher can then get them to do the personalization while waiting for the other students to catch up. Here's another way of personalizing an exercise. So let's look at it first from the point of view of form. The students underline the adjectives with a synonym first. So Hannah is very hardworking. The synonym is studious. Dan has a logical way of thinking, analytic. Jim is a sociable person, gregarious. So the students first replace the adjectives with a synonym, and then they move on to the second part of the exercise, which asks them to replace the names in the exercise with names of students in the school. So they do that and then discuss with their partner whether they agree. Now, in this case, obviously, this exercise works because the adjectives are all positive adjectives. This exercise would not work if the students were working on antonyms. So, for example, if number 6 was Rosa is really stupid, she gets everything wrong, you certainly would not ask them to personalize or put names of students they know to that sentence for very obvious reasons. Students may well be working on their own with these two exercises. The first one gets the students to find words for the definitions. Detached house with one floor, bungalow. House which is joined to my neighbour's house, detached house. House on the edge of the city, in the suburbs, and so on. And once they've done that, they go back and tick the sentences that are true for them. So they're working on their own, but they're still personalizing the exercise. Similarly, in the exercise on the right, students from the start are asked to write students that are true for themselves. So they have to use will or won't have done. Number 2, I will have drunk a couple of glasses of water. I'm not very good at drinking water. I will have drunk 2 glasses of water by the end of the day. I won't have cooked a meal because I'm going out, and so on. So the point here is that even when the students are working alone, by associating the language with something personal, the language is likely to be more memorable. There's some language that is more difficult to personalize. However, you can still make the exercise meaningful. So in this exercise, the first sentence practices the expression breaking the law. Clearly, you're not going to write an exercise where you're not going to ask the students, have you ever broken the law? or when was the last time you broke the law, or do you know anybody who's broken the law? So in this case, the solution is to write statements that students can agree or disagree with. It's a good way, again, to get the students thinking critically. So there are many ways of making the language practice meaningful. Even when you're doing controlled language practice activities, as in the examples that I've shown you, language learning does not have to be meaningless. I believe that, and all the authors of Focus believe, that meaning should be central to all practice activities, however controlled or free, and at whatever level. Students learn more effectively when engaged in activities on a personal level. And I'll finish off with the Focus author's favourite quote by Rod Ellis. Rod Ellis is Distinguished Professor at the University of Auckland, New Zealand. And his research is into second language acquisition with a particular interest in task-based learning. So I quote, "It is the need to get meanings across and the pleasure experience when this is achieved that motivates second language acquisition." So there we are. I raced through that. I hope I made up the time we lost at the beginning. Oof. Now, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have if I'm able to answer them. Yes, we're done. Somebody asked, are we done? We're done. Happy to take questions. Thank you very much for waiting and listening. Thank you for your thank yous. There's a question there about, does Focus correspond to beginner or elementary levels? Elementary, pre-intermediate, intermediate, and upper. Let me just refer to the back of a Focus book. There are 5 levels, and so we go from A2 to C1. I wonder if there is any way we can motivate students to engage in writing as well. Well, yes, applying the same, providing them with interesting topics that are part of their world. Yes, I know it's difficult to get students writing, although, you know, they write more nowadays than ever before with texting and social media. Let's see. Can we have a link to the books, please? Yes, I'm sure somebody will provide that for you. Can I watch the webinar later? Yes, yes, exactly. You will be sent a link to watch all of the webinars that we're giving on Focus. What level was the presentation from? Most of the material I showed you were from B1 to B2. It was a range of levels, but mainly between B1 and B2. Do you know there's a list of those 1,000 high frequency words? Now, yes, I think when I refer to the 3,000 most frequent words in the English language, the way I always check them is in a dictionary. All of the modern English language teaching dictionaries have that information now. So that's the easiest place to go and look. No, I had a website for you here. I'm afraid I don't. But if you Google Paul Nation, the professor who I quoted earlier on in the webinar, um, he has done a lot of work on word frequency, and I'm sure you'll find that information um, either through Googling Paul Nation or in any of the material that he's written. Um, Sorry not to be more specific. I can't remember websites off the top of my head. I'm really sorry. Uh, yeah, there are any. Can you share where we can find more materials on reading? Um, Well, Google is fantastic. That's nowadays the job of the materials writer, it has been made much easier. That's where we find all our material. We go on the internet. We have an idea of the kind of topic we want to find, and we just search the internet. We used to cut out articles from magazines and keep them in endless files, but now it's much easier, thank goodness. Um, I think the trick is to keep those three questions in mind. Is this something that my students can relate to? Is it interesting for my target readership? And if you're using it for language contextualization, make sure that there's something in there that the students can learn. Pearson English readers, absolutely. Get your students reading readers. My goodness, yes. Anything that encourages them to read more. And readers are of course, readers are ideal because they have also already been adapted to be as useful as possible as language input because they contain uh, uh, um, they they contain more high frequency vocabulary than the authentic texts. Mhm. Uh, Is there any possibility for you to hold a seminar for the teachers in Bosnia and Herzegovina? Love to. Of course, I would have far rather come to all your places than sit here in front of my computer, but what a fantastic way to reach a big audience. And, thank you so much for tuning in and bearing with me at the beginning. Um, okay, I think we seem to have run out of questions now. Thank you so much again, and hopefully see you again. These are the places we are coming to visit in the near future. So if you live in one of these places, we look forward to seeing you there.